Hey, Patreon backers, thank you, as always, for supporting us. As I've said in the past, the support is tremendous at this point. Just, one, it's nice to have Discord to hang out with people, for the most part. Actually, it's great now. Everything's good now. It's good to hang out with you guys. It helps me keep an ear to the ground on stuff. Helps me remember kind of like where my mindset was when I was more of a consumer than a content creator, when I consume more of the content. Really appreciate you all being there, and also financial support's really good too. So first question, FourthTuna. If you have questions, post them in the Patreon Discord. FourthTuna says, Steve, you've made a bunch of detailed content about Final Fantasy 15. Can we expect more game-related content? Personally, I would like to. Yeah, we used to do a ton of it, but there haven't been a lot of major launches this year. So what you all could help me with is we do really like doing that kind of content because Andrew is skilled in 3D art. He can help inform a lot of what I say about the games and the game graphics. I'm informed in, to some extent, game engines, and to some extent game art, and then GPU architecture. And Patrick is really good at helping with all the testing on that stuff. So what we need the most is to know what games are coming out that people actually care about. Because to put the level of effort in required to do Final Fantasy 15 style content is tremendous. It is very time consuming. And the trouble with games is we don't really get early access. So typically the way it works, and this is why I've done less of it over the past years personally, the way it works typically is game launches at something like midnight. Maybe get on a Korea VPN. You can access it at 6 p.m. or something if you're lucky. So what I would do when I covered every single game launch, so this is before we got hardware, so it's flipped. Now we get hardware, so I don't do as much with games as opposed to the inverse, because you work with what you can get access to, and a $50 game is much easier to get access to than hardware. So the way I used to do it was game launches at midnight. I planned my sleep schedule the night before and wake up at 1 p.m., which kind of sucks to like move all your sleep around like that. Stay up from that point till 12, and hopefully you can pre-download it in that time. Start benchmarking the game at 12 a.m. and get done. Typically, it would take me about 6 hours to do all the cards for the ones we published. 6 hours to do all the testing. Start writing the article, mostly when I worked alone, at 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. Finish by 10 a.m. With the article and with a video if I made one by myself mostly at that time. I certainly wouldn't make an employee come on at 6 a.m. to do that. So it's a really challenging process because you want your stuff to be online the day that the game launches. So to not finish before that is just shooting yourself in the foot, because if you're going to do half the work, if you're going to do 6 hours of testing and then not finish it till the next day, you just wasted 6 hours. You lose all your view momentum. So it's very difficult to do. However, I love working on games because they're really interesting. The technology, software is far more complex than hardware. And, well, software's interaction with hardware is very complex. So here's what you can do. When you see new games coming out primarily for PC, let me know in the Discord. Tag me, whatever. And we will kind of keep a mental tally of how many people are interested in that game and try and look at it, because it's hard for me to keep up with all the game launches these days. So I'm keeping up with hardware launches. Blaank says, how many camera, microphones, and batteries do you have, and how many do you go through on a typical day of floor coverage? We don't. Okay, so I just had the thought that I would like pull the camera battery and show you, except it's actually in the camera right now. The camera battery is like, it's big. It's like this thickness, and it's a $300 battery. It will last an entire day of floor coverage, especially because we shoot at 1080p at conventions. So we're good there. We have 2 large camera batteries. For redundancy, I typically try to keep 3. We have like 30 AA lithium-ion batteries that we use for like the wireless transmitters, receivers, all that stuff. We don't really go through those even during a week. So my rule is every other day at the show, change the wireless receiver and the recorder batteries, and every day at the show, charge and change the light batteries and the camera batteries. The light batteries die the fastest. We have it's actually this exact size. We have like an on-camera light that's this size, super bright. Couldn't film without it, and burns through batteries like crazy. So we have like 6 of those. It's kind of stupid how, you know, you can have a bag full of camera equipment and like $1,000 of value in the bag is batteries, but that's the way it goes. That's the way it goes if you want good ones. We don't typically go through too many during the show, like during a day. It's more the light batteries. That said, show coverage stuff is always really interesting to answer because there are a lot of unique things we have to go through for covering shows. So if you have questions about conventions, please post them somewhere, Patreon or Discord, whatever, because I love answering those. They're kind of fun. It gives a unique perspective on what we deal with in the highest stress environment we can be in. So I always like those. Next question. I don't have the name for this one, sorry. Do you gain performance on a CLC or any radiator by, I think is this Zeta maybe? By sealing the gap between the fan frames and the radiator. By sealing the gap between the, okay, gotcha. Theoretically, yes. I can tell you that I have seen performance impact from doing tests previously where we would mount fewer screws. So like I was trying to figure out how did it behave if I put 2 screws in the fan versus 4, and I don't know if we ever published that data, but it was basically just because a lot of people will get lazy and use 2 screws instead of 4. I wanted to know, does that impact performance? The answer was yes. When there was a significant gap, especially in the opposing corners, we saw a couple degrees difference repeatedly. As for if you have 4 screws in there, honestly, not much air gets out, and if a lot does, there's something else probably wrong with the fan cowling or something, or casing. But yeah, sealing any gap is going to help. Actually, for our wind tunnel, we seal the gap around the outside of it to make sure all the air gets through and make sure the tests are controlled. Would I recommend putting tape around it? No. Any difference? If you have all 4 screws in there, the differences are going to be less than single-digit degree. Like your difference will be from how difficult it is to do a thermal test without equipment. So don't worry about it. Next question. Many. Do you have equipment to test airflow and static pressure? Yes. Wind tunnel. So with different fin density radiators, yeah, we test airflow easy. So the thing is, to test CFM, cubic feet per minute, you need to know the volume. So you can't get a cubic feet per minute number without knowing the volume that you're pushing the air through. We know the volume of this because we worked with Corsair to make it. So we know the volume of this tube, so we can calculate CFM with a spreadsheet because we get LPM or FPM if you prefer, linear feet per minute out one side. You know the volume, you can compute the cubic feet per minute from those 2 numbers, from volume and for LPM. We don't have pressure sensors. I considered buying a couple of pressure sensors. It probably cost me like, I don't know, upper hundreds of dollars to really do it properly. It wouldn't be bad, but I think what I'm going to do instead is just get an effective static pressure number, not a literal static pressure number, where we put a fixed same radiator, like an Aztec one, because they're so common, on one side, push air through it, and see how it performs. And we get a fixed dust filter that never changes, pull and push air through it, see how it performs relative to other fans. That should be enough, I think. Inversion. Fantasy question. If ever Linus invites you to become a participant in the next Scrapyard Wars season, assuming this is do-overs duo, who would you prefer as a partner? Also, theoretically speaking, what theme do you expect for the next season? I don't know what theme I would expect. Which partner? That's a pretty fun question. So let me go through, I'll go through what's going on in my head as I'm figuring it out. Let's kind of go down the list of just American YouTubers because they're the people I talk to the most. So, Paul. Paul is, let's start with him. I feel like Paul would be very methodical and would keep good organization and track of what's going on, which would help for the way I build things. And then let's see, we have Kyle. I think Kyle would basically guarantee that I win any kind of like, he would pull all the weight for anything more creative. Jay would be interesting because I think we would both be kind of like alpha in getting the best parts. So I'm not sure how that would work out. I love hanging out with Jay though. Who else is there in the US? I don't watch too many YouTubers. I'm more of a creator than a consumer these days. See, I think the thing with anyone like data driven, anyone who's got a good amount of numbers, like let's say Ryan Shrout, PC Perspective, Ryan Smith, Anantech, any of the traditional web guys, you have an advantage because you hopefully have like a database in your head of numbers, and you can just like, you look at two things on sale and you can just instantly know which one does better in your tests. So that's an advantage. Let me answer the question directly though. I'm gonna say, can I pick Luke? I think that'd be the, I think Luke and I tend to have a pretty good time when we hang out. So I'd say if I could pick Luke, let's do that. Next one, also, he's never on camera anymore, and I think everyone would like that. Static Albatross. I just purchased a mod mat. I didn't feel I really needed one, but months of direct and indirect advertising along with the new color scheme pushed me over the edge. Anyway, is there something like a heat gun for loosening out adhesive on phones, safe for a mat or printing on the mat? Also, can you state the mat's maximum safe temperature, assuming you have that available? I found this for Static Albatross and sent it over. Someone also asked separately if the mat's safe for soldering. The answer is no, it's not a soldering mat. We definitely don't recommend that you put a soldering iron on it. You'll eventually melt through the rubber. Soldering irons are hot. Ink is certainly going to be more susceptible to heat damage than the rubber, but the rubber is not impervious to high temperature things. So no, we wouldn't recommend using it for soldering. That's okay. The mat doesn't need to be everything to everyone. It's got to be affordable too. And doing that would have just been out of the question for now. So don't recommend laying a soldering iron on top of it. The temperatures, I did check with the factory. I haven't tested this myself yet, okay? So I checked with them though, and I want to test it. Probably just get a heat gun and see what happens. What they told me is that they recommend the mat staying at or below 60 degrees Celsius. And they also quoted a number of, let me look it up. Hang on one second. Okay, got it. I had to wait an eternity for my phone to restart. So, all right, here's what I got. Factory told us keep the mat at or under 60 degrees Celsius. Again, I haven't tested over that. I don't know how conservative that number is. It's not something I'd considered genuinely. So I'm certainly going to take a heat gun to it and test it. They said at 150 degrees Celsius, it melts in about 15 seconds. So don't use it for things like soldering. Don't put it under 150 degrees, it'll melt. I mean, I'm not gonna market the mat to you if you're trying to use it for soldering. It's not a good fit. So yeah, it's great for everything else, but don't put a soldering iron on it. So yeah, that's hopefully that answers that question. As for the mat itself though, we have reworked for the most recent run that shipped, we reworked some of the material and printing process, so it's super ruggedized and kind of like sticky now in a way that when you drop screws, they kind of stick in place, which is really nice. But you know where to pick it up. Otherwise, just leave questions for me in the Patreon Discord as always. Thank you for watching. You're already subscribed. I'll see you all next time.